Okay, good afternoon, everyone. We're going to try to get started. We have one, are we missing? We're good. That's not far down that line. All right. So we have, I think, 7 members of the committee, and there may be some others joining. Should mute. What do I do here, Mel?
Yourself there.
Okay. No. I might just turn this off.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, we're coming to order. This is a public hearing of the Correction Advisory Committee. I'm Tig Dooley, one of the co-chairs of the committee, along with Marisol Garcia, who's here to my left. We'll ask the other members of the committee to introduce themselves briefly in a moment, but I'll just start with the sort of game plan for what's on the agenda today. So as probably most people in the room know, the advisory committee was created by statute to provide advice and oversight with respect to corrections in Connecticut, but also importantly, primarily in the statute, to recruit, select, vet candidates for the position of correction ombuds, which is a position also created by statute as part of the PROTECT Act. And that's what we're here to do tonight. As many folks know, it's not our first attempt at this. We were here almost exactly a year ago in a meeting that went long into the night. We're hoping to do a little bit better today in terms of moving things along. And so with that in mind, I don't intend to speak at length now. I just wanted to explain how we'll proceed. We have 3 finalists for the position. These are folks who submitted applications, went through a review process and then an interview process, and came out as the top 3. And our mandate on the statute is to rank these 3 and present them to the governor. And the governor can then choose from that list. It's a ranked list, but as we know, he can choose any of the 3. But there is what's at stake here is, I guess, that ranking. So we're very happy to have 3 excellent candidates: Dawn Poindexter, Keisha Ellis, and Devon Ward. They're going to each take a turn introducing themselves and their vision for the office. There'll be a little bit of time for members of the committee to ask questions. During each candidate's time speaking, the other 2 will be out of the room. And for that reason, we're going to start with Ms. Poindexter, who's joining us via Zoom. So that's a slight switch from the order in the agenda. And after we've gone through each of the 3 candidates, there'll be an opportunity for members of the public, both here and on Zoom, to make statements. And again, we just ask that folks try to remain focused on the task at hand when they've got the mic, so that we can then proceed to our meeting, at which we will, in fact, vote on the rankings and the list that will be sent to the governor. So I think that's all you need to know. And so I'll just quickly ask the members of the committee here. We can start with Andrew. Just introduce yourself, and I think if you can recall what we each have a sort of like specialization on the committee. So if you remember what that is, forget it. All right, just introduce yourself.
Andrew Gearing. I work as on the mic on. Good evening. I'm Andrew Gearing. I work as an assistant federal public defender. I believe I was appointed as one with a history of representing the interests of incarcerated persons.
Hello, everyone. My name is Darryl McGraw. I am a formerly incarcerated person, so I am representing the formerly incarcerated people population.
Good afternoon, everyone. Melvin Medina. I believe I was appointed as someone with experience in civil rights work.
Okay.
Yeah, and again, Tig Dooley, I'm the legal expert, or at least designated, if not, in fact.
Marisol Garcia, also formerly incarcerated, who brings lived experience and also expertise to this position.
Hi, everyone. My name is Reena Kapoor. I am a psychiatrist and a professor at the Yale School of Medicine. My role on the committee is the person who has expertise in medications and mental health of incarcerated people.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kaisha Velasquez. I'm a licensed mental health therapist, and I believe my role is around mental health issues and the community of the incarcerated population. Thank you.
One member on Zoom.
Sure. Hopefully you guys can hear me. My name is Ben Howell. I'm an assistant professor of medicine at the Yale School of Medicine. I'm a general internist. I don't exactly recall my sort of specialty, but it's similar to Dr. Kapoor's as another medical provider.
Okay, thanks. So I see now we have Ms. Poindexter, our first candidate finalist on the Zoom as well. Before we begin with her, I did mean to just take a moment to thank each of our three finalists genuinely for your interest in this position, the time and effort you put into preparing applications, meeting with us, and what has come across as your dedication to the mission of the position, particularly at a time when well, I won't say anymore, but it's great to have you here. And if we could have Ms. Ellis and Mr. Ward skedaddle somewhere, and then we'll call you back in when it's your turn. Kirsten Briner, our wonderful aide, will coordinate that, and then we'll get started with Ms. Poindexter. Okay, so Ms. Poindexter, if you can hear us, and maybe test out your microphone. I can see you on the Zoom screen. What we would love is if you want to take just a couple of minutes to introduce yourself, and sort of your vision for the office, and then we'll take some time to ask questions and hear what you have to say.
Okay. Well, so first of all, good afternoon. This is only panel members on the line right now, right? And government officials.
Now the whole world is watching.
Okay.
I don't know who you can see. You have the members of the committee, but then there are members of the public gathered in the room here, and I believe we're, it's possible to watch on YouTube or something. But so
okay. So good afternoon, esteemed government officials, panel members, and members of the public. My name is Dawn Poindexter, and I'm honored to appear before you as a candidate for the ombudsman position. With decades of experience in leadership, conflict resolution, community support, I've dedicated my career to fostering equality, solutions for underserved populations, and ensuring transparency and fairness in processes that impact individuals and families. My service on the grievance panel and the Board of Appeals for Hamden has provided me with firsthand experience in addressing complex concerns with impartiality, integrity, and a deep respect for all perspectives. In my professional role, ranging from managing teams at Yale New Haven Hospital to leading Abundant Harvest Outreach community engagement, I have developed and implemented strategies that strengthen family, resolve disputes, and build trust in systems. I bring expertise in active listening, policy interpretation, and collaborative problem solving, which I have apply effectively in addressing sensitive issues in diverse settings, from schools and community organization. As an ombudsman, I will work to establish a fair and equitable process that upholds impartiality, ensures every voice is heard. I'm committed to creating transparency, accessible systems for reporting and resolutions, fostering trust between the staff and when making complaints and from the complainants, I'm sorry, and addressing root causes to achieve meaningful outcomes. My approach emphasizes respect, accountability, and compassion, values that I have defined in my career and continue to guide my work. My commitment to transparency, fairness, and collaborative solutions directly aligns with the committee's mission to uphold justice, accountability, and systems improvements in this last year. As a facilitator of the women's group at York Prison, I have empowered incarcerated women to advocate for themselves, navigate daily challenges in communication with correctional officers, and develop critical thinking skills to make informed decisions. This experience, combined with my lifelong dedication to fostering equality and transparency and systemic reform, equips me to serve as an effective ombudsman committed to advancing justice and improving outcomes for all stakeholders. Thank you for the opportunity to present my vision for this role. I'm committed to serving with integrity, impartiality, and dedication and fairness.
Okay, thank you very much. So now we'll take a minute to ask questions of you. I don't know if there's no particular order we need to go in. So I'll just start. If you wouldn't mind sharing with us what your particular priorities would be if you're chosen for the position. As you know, there are a number of responsibilities that fall under the remit of the ombuds, and I'd like to know which of these you would be particularly focused on if you take the
Well, my understanding, this position is being built and is not a current position for this particular role. Am I correct?
Yeah, that's correct. There is an interim ombuds, but it is essentially a
Hello?
recent office.
Like there's nobody currently in this role.
Well, there is an interim ombuds who is sort of like in the acting position and is also a candidate for the permanent position. But yeah, it's a new office, and so yeah,
Hello?
interested in hearing your vision for setting it up. Maybe. Can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so my first agenda would be there was a proposed budget for 400,000 being allocated. So my first agenda item would be staffing and supporting and identifying all the different positions that are needed, in addition to working on the extra financing, because my understanding from this role that in addition to that, I would have to develop a funding plan so it would be the creating the budget, creating the different roles, then strategies to empower corrections, and then I would kind of put the department together.
And what experience can you draw upon? I think you're identified quite appropriately a major task for the initial ombuds person, which is to increase the funding or work to increase the funding for the office. What can you tell us about your experience in fundraising and lobbying or related areas that might be of use in terms of increasing the budget for this office?
Well, as far as fundraising is concerned, it's all been private funds. So one of my roles have been in Abundant Harvest Outreach Community Engagement. That's a nonprofit that services the greater New Haven area. So in that role right there, we have to solicit funds every year. We run youth programs and we run family service programs. So a combination of experience I have is grant writing. In addition to the grant writing, just fundraising, having activities that we do community events and we fundraise in that manner. So I have not I do not have any experience in public fundraising, but I do have experience in private fundraising.
So, Ms. Poindexter, I'm actually going to get to the root of, your statement when, I've heard this so many times in terms of funding being a concern, but because this role has been sitting, the PROTECT Act was enacted several years back. We've been struggling to fill this role. So how would you address the immediate needs of the impacted community? Because I understand we need money. I understand we need a lot of things, but if we are not addressing the problems of those that are impacted, research can only get you so far. Same thing with money. So we need to address the issues at hand. And how would you go about doing that within stepping into this role?
So the first thing I would do to address the affected community is identify exactly the root causes of the issues in that particular population. Once I have identified what those issues are that need to be addressed, then I would put a plan of action in place. And some of the methodologies that I have used, so I'm going to use York Correction because that kind of mirrors the population that we're speaking on today. So for the past year, maybe about 14 months, I've been working with women in York Corrections. I'm a facilitator of a women's group. And one of the issues there that always come up as a concern is just that daily communication between correctional officers and, the women that are there. So what methodology I use is just to empower them as individual to begin to learn how to problem solve, to work through issues and be critical thinkers about, what the issues are and what their power is in those particular challenges, and then kind of work through them that way. And so now to answer your question, because now we're talking about both parties, it would be more the same methodology, sitting and having, once you identify what the issues are, you kind of prioritize what should be addressed first, what's the most important. And I always try to start where they are at instead of starting where I think people should be at, because you get more input. And then as a stakeholder for corrections, I would more kind of sell what benefits are in, having the women, kind of addressing the women in a different manner, if that's kind of like the root cause, because I'm only hearing one side of the coin now is how they see things, and I haven't really heard the perspective of the correctional officer. So I guess to kind of wrap it up is that you start with just hearing both sides of the story, and then you identify like what the root causes are, and then you work on a plan of action from there. Did that answer that question?
My question is, based on what you know today, how is the DOC doing in meeting the mental health needs of incarcerated people?
Well, it probably would be a biased response, but I will answer from the knowledge that I do have, but it is basically based on my engagement from the women that I work with. So I do have a degree in social work and a minor in psychology. So when I interact or engage with these women, I do feel that there could be more support in supporting women with their mental health. You hear that come up in group all the time, like not so much that it's kind of implied that it comes up. You could tell from the conversation, the struggles that they're having and how they interpret, just life in prison. I feel like there could be more support for mental health just from the work that I do with them.
Thank you.
So I just would like to ask if there's anything in your personal history, you touched upon seeing both sides of the coin, and I'm not sure if you've had an opportunity to explain any experience you have with impacted community and or correctional staff. Anything you'd like to share that might, sort of weigh on your qualifications for the position?
So I don't have any experience directly with correctional staff, but drawing from my managerial role, I have successfully recruited and trained diverse teams while fostering a culture of inclusion and respect. So I feel like I would develop a recruitment plan that prioritizes candidates with expertise in corrections, human rights, and conflict resolution. So basically get some type of consultation in the beginning to kind of understand in all fairness, so I can remain objective in solving these issues. But also in addition to that, I feel like I would develop training programs that will focus on active listening, unbiased investigation, and adhering to state and federal employment laws, but also by fostering a supportive and professional environment. I will also ensure that the team is equipped to meet the office goals with integrity and competence. But that's all wrapped up in just kind of like, I always go into any position that I have had in the past with just actively listening, hearing the concerns from both sides, and then diverting, then from there, putting together a plan of action.
Ms. Poindexter, I'd like to kind of push on this a little bit.
Okay.
You have spoken in terms of your professional experience and your abilities in management. You've also talked about the ability to see things from both perspectives. I'm wondering, during our interview process, you shared some personal things, and I understand if this is not the arena for it, but I'm wondering if you can give a little more point where, from the impacted community, if you can be able to draw on your own personal experience and be able to speak on it, where you're able to work effectively for both sides despite personal experiences.
Well, I feel like I can, because definitely I did share some personal experiences that happened in my life that probably more represent the population that we're speaking on today. And so I definitely can identify with a lot of this population and be able to relate to them. So now your question was, can I be biased? Because now we're looking at coming together and bring
Being unbiased. Just want to make sure to be able to effectively represent this population.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
To effectively be unbiased to represent this population.
So to finish answering your question, I guess the methodology that I would use is just building trust. Really starts with demonstrating genuine care and respect. And I do genuinely care and respect each person as an individual. And I feel like I'm a good listener, and I prioritize listening as far as acknowledging people's concerns without judgment and following through with the commitment of whatever that plan of action is. So to answer your question is that I just feel like if I work where I've always done, where I feel like I have a strength, is just developing the relationships, because the relationships bring the trust and the confidence, and it kind of puts everybody on the same playing field to be able to talk candidly about whatever those issues are. And I have been in arenas that we have really kind of explored issues that are uncomfortable, like, diversity, racism, those kind of issues that are really kind of difficult to talk about, like the elephant in the room. But I do feel like I have a strength to kind of create dialogue to, kind of press past issues that are not that comfortable to speak on.
Thank you.
Hi, Ms. Poindexter. Can you hear me? Ms. Poindexter?
And I guess, can I add something to that?
Sure.
Go ahead, but we didn't hear you for the last 30 seconds or so, so you may want to repeat yourself.
Oh, I said, may I add something to that? Because I feel like, in my first interview, I did share a personal story that, I mean, it's my passion. So I can share that same story. I know this is a public forum, but I will share that same story. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay. So when I interviewed the first time, one of the questions was, why did what was my interest in this position? And one of the stories that I shared, because I shared many of stories, is that one of my passions is that 3 years ago, my son was murdered in the city of New Haven. And what bothered me, besides the fact that he's not here no more, is the community and the way the community respond or their non-response. It's almost like the community is paralyzed now. And so nobody cooperated as far as being concerned with who murdered him. There was no concern about there was no concern in regards to it being 2 o'clock in the daytime and broad daylight. You didn't hear any response about safety. Everybody just kind of went into their own homes and then life just moved on. But from that, it just let me see how much the city of New Haven, I grew up in the city of New Haven, how much communities have been, I guess I want to say, it's like a paralysis that's there. And so how do I translate that to why I'm interested in this position? I really enjoyed my work at York Prison. And even though I don't have a lot of interaction, it kind of helps me to kind of build on rebuilding relationships, rebuilding trust, rebuilding opportunities for communities. And that's kind of what I focus on in the women's prison, is kind of taking that group and treating it like a community and rebuilding it. And whatever interactions I do have with correctional officers, I do actively listen and kind of share other perspectives and whatever opinion they have about women that are incarcerated. So it's an opportunity for me to rebuild relationships through the methodologies that I have been employing for years and been successful with building relationships.
Hi, Ms. Poindexter. Can you hear me?
Yes.
How are you? I missed your interview. So number one, I'll say my condolences for your loss, and it's a pleasure to meet you, and thank you for coming today.
Oh, thank you.
I want to say I like when you just shared, like, you shared from the heart, and that's what this job is about. It's like working with humans, right? And sharing from the heart, like you just shared, you had no problem sitting back. You got real comfortable, and you were like, and I like to see that part of you. Could you talk about because you talk about both sides, and I'm just trying to figure out that other side that you're talking about, because we're really focusing on the individuals that are impacted by the criminal justice system and brothers and sisters that are incarcerated that are struggling. So that would be the role. That what other side are you talking about?
Well, I guess I always say the other side, because how are they impacted? What is happening that they're impacted? So there's something or someone that's impacting this community in a way that's causing a concern that we're here interviewing for a position to address that. So when I say the other side, I feel like if there's something or someone or, you know, an entity that's impacting this community in a way that's not beneficial, that has to be addressed as well. It has to be um, a different way of approaching it where, you know, there's some knowledge, there's some education, and there's some new perspectives on the table about how you know, address this population so that there could be better outcomes in the future.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good evening, Ms. Poindexter, and again, so sorry to hear about your loss.
Thank you.
From an eagle eye kind of perspective, the Department of Corrections provides a service delivery to incarcerated people that have to be there. That includes shelter, food, medical and mental health, and so operations and conditions. And the role of the ombuds person is in part to ensure that the service delivery is one that is at the very least meeting human rights standards and certainly civil rights standards. And I'm curious, as you think of the role of the ombudsman, so much of it is related to the need to investigate complaints that are received. And there's this difficult challenge of balancing individual need on a particular complaint and trends in a service system that may actually be not only not providing a good service to people, but maybe undermining their own human rights and civil liberties, or at least in the context of the conditions that they're in. And so I'm really curious about your experience in the policy and legal world, and if not, how you would tackle that aspect of the job that is pretty critical and important, to both be an advocate for incarcerated people at the Connecticut General Assembly, which is a component of what this role is also responsible for, but also the potential routes of litigation or necessary administrative policy changes that the department needs to take on. And just curious your thoughts on that angle. How would you go about tackling that aspect of the role, whether that would be you yourself or the team that you develop?
So I first want to start with, before I actually answer that question, I have to give you some background of my experience. So when you mentioned first civil rights and human rights. So I feel like from my experience and working in corrections for a year and a half, that that's not translated exactly how maybe we assume today that is being translated in the minds of those who are providing the service, and especially in human rights. And I hear that all the time. So what I do, even on an individual basis in my communication, because this will speak to the you know, when you're having those litigation sessions, is that I feel like even though I'm having private conversations and I'm not dealing with everybody in corrections, and I'm not saying that everybody think like this in corrections, that I'm always providing a different perspective on and kind of reminding them in an informal way about, you know, that this population is human, and kind of look at the bigger picture, like you said, because we are, you know, they should be providing a service. So, so to answer your question, when you're having those sessions, and I guess I kind of, I don't have a lot of, you know, on-hand knowledge about policy and procedure in this particular arena, but I have dealt with policy and procedure in labor relations. And so the methodology that I employed then was I kind of, as whatever the particular case was, you know, kind of educated or abreast myself in whatever that policy was or that procedure, because that's where I at least want to start from that point. And then from there, kind of identify, some methodologies for solving whatever that the concern from the complaints that are being brought forth. And I also want to add to that is that there's a shift going on simultaneously that, corrections really didn't have like a mission to correct in that manner, or rehab. So when you say you're providing services, the services can be looked at from that population as, this is just something that we're doing as far as a system, but it kind of takes out the or abstracts the dehumanized point of providing those services. So I guess even in, whatever arenas I would have, it would be a team, and the team would be trained in that manner to be sensitive, to always have kind of like incorporate into those dialogues a reminder of that in that service that you are providing, that there are, civil rights and especially human rights, because I, from my experience, don't always see that there's a clear understanding of that. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you
Yeah,
very
thank you.
much, Ms. Poindexter. If there's no other questions, you're welcome to just sum up with anything that you weren't able to get across, but we very much appreciate your application and your time.
Well, I guess I had I kind of, from the first interview that I had, I really had prepared some examples that I had to kind of explain in a little bit more depth of the work that I do. This is my first public speaking. I speak on a private manner, so please excuse me. But so I wanted to just talk about before we end, just to kind of, because I guess my pet peeve in this role is just being able to solve whatever the conflict. So there's a complaint that makes it a conflict because it's a complaint. And so the complainant is basically saying that there is something that was not followed. And then and the defendant is saying that they did follow whatever, what that issue was. So that's the real argument there. And so where I feel like I bring an expertise to that is that I feel like I'm really good at mediation and solving conflict between, two parties. And so I just wanted to share something that's not exactly in that role, but I had documented this as one thing to share, one experience. So in my role as the director of Abundant Harvest Outreach Community Engagement, I have had plenty of opportunities to mediate conflict between a caregiver and a parent uniting with their child. Both parties had strong emotions and different views on the child's best interest. But what I did was I began by creating a safe space for dialogue, active listening to their concerns, and reframing the conversation to focus on shared goals, ensuring that the interest was the child's well-being. And so I guess in a case to kind of make a mirror, I guess whatever dialogue or whatever's going on, kind of remind them of whatever, this population's well-being benefits are, and then carefully examine the facts, including the child's needs and the resources. And then the outcome was a collaborative
Ms.
plan.
Poindexter,
Yes.
in the interest of time, only because we
Oh,
have
I'm sorry.
other candidates and we want to
Yes.
make sure that we give everyone their due space. We do
Absolutely.
appreciate the walkthrough, though we do feel from our prior interviews that we had a good insight into your background, and thank you for the desire to expound on that, but we might not do that actually right now.
Okay.
I'll turn it back to the chair.
Okay,
Yeah, thank you very much. And
thank
certainly
you.
us who interviewed you recall much of your experience, and we have your application materials, which are part of the consideration that we're undertaking today. But thank you for joining us, and you can remain on the Zoom. Yeah, that's so you just mute yourself, and we're gonna move on to Ms. Ellis as our second candidate.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
thank you.
Yeah, right there's fine. Okay, hello again, Ms. Ellis. Thank you so much for joining us. If you'd like to begin with any prepared remarks, opening statement, give us some of your background and vision for the office. We'll then follow up with whatever questions we have. Thanks.
Is this on? Can you hear me? Oh,
No, I think there's a button. Yep, there you go.
there it goes. Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Keisha Ellis, and I want to begin by expressing my heartfelt gratitude for being selected as one of the final 3 candidates for this position. I am deeply honored and humbled to stand before you today. Justice is not just a concept, it's a lived experience. Over the past 2 decades, I have dedicated to my life to ensuring fairness and dignity within the correctional system, advocating for those who often feel unseen and unheard. My journey has been unconventional, but has given me a unique perspective to understand the transformative power of second chances and the critical role of empathy and compassion in our justice system. For 18 and a half years, I worked for the Federal Bureau of Prisons. I worked as a counselor and a case manager supporting incarcerated women. I addressed issues of trauma, mental health, and substance abuse. I learned that rehabilitation begins with understanding, not judgment, and that people can rise above their past. Then my life changed. Over a decade ago, I found myself on the other side of the criminal justice system. This profound experience taught me that mistakes do not have to define us, they can refine us. I developed a deeper empathy and a belief in the life-saving power of second chances. When I returned to the field, I carried this perspective with me. For over 7 years, I worked as a program manager for halfway houses contracted by the DOC. I opened up a female halfway house in 2022, building the program from the ground up. I drafted policies, hired staff, managed budgets, and ensured client needs were met. I successfully led that program for over a year, creating a space for women to rebuild their lives. I currently oversee a 60-bed male halfway house program addressing mental health struggles, substance abuse, and violent histories while fostering accountability and hope. We live in a society that often defines people by their mistakes, forgetting that those mistakes can become foundations for growth. Justice should embody humanity, treating every individual, incarcerated or not, with dignity and fostering opportunities for growth and healing. Empathy and compassion are not weaknesses, they're strengths. I know as an ombudsman, it's about building trust, advocating for fairness, and amplifying the voices of the unheard.
fostering collaboration between correctional staff, incarcerated individuals, and their families. If entrusted with this position, my first plan is to conduct a listen tour to engage directly with impacted individuals and correctional staff. Evaluate the budget, ensure wise use of resources, and create sustainability strategies. Prioritize staffing the office and create a strategic plan tailored to the needs of those we serve. My long-term goal will be to develop actionable recommendations for systemic improvement, uphold principles of fairness, transparency, and accountability, strengthen the department for long-term success. In closing, we all make mistakes, but we are not defined by those mistakes. We are defined by how we rise from them. My life has been a testament to this truth. I have walked through the darkest valleys, emerging with a purpose. To ensure that justice is not just a system, but a promise that recognizes the power of second chances, the importance of compassion, and the value of every human life. Thank you for your time and your consideration. It will be my great honor to serve as your ombudsperson and contribute to creating a more just and equitable system for all.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ellis. As you mentioned, you have 18 years experience in the Federal Bureau of Prisons. In that regard, two questions. One, do you see any differences between the federal system and our state system and the Department of Corrections? And is there anything in particular from that you would have learned from your time serving in the Bureau of Prisons that you might take with you, so to speak, to this job? And then second, do you have any concerns about building trust with the incarcerated population, given your past experience as a BOP counselor, and how would you go about building that trust to the extent there might be any reservations among certain folks in the population?
I think that's when it comes to the difference between the federal and the state, I think that's a good question. There is, to me, I think there's a big difference. When I look at how the federal runs, how DOC runs, when it comes to their medical, when it comes to their education, when it comes to addressing the mental health needs of incarcerated individuals, I think there's a big difference when it comes between the two. If you look at when you look at it, well, when I look at it and I hear things now working, in the halfway houses, when I see things, they're coming home from DOC, things that they would say that occurred in DOC, I would say to myself, that would never occur in the Federal Bureau of Prisons. So just certain things that, I see. As far as getting any pushback from incarcerated individuals, no. Because I think that what they will understand is that we're almost like, so to speak, in a lack of better words, we're almost like family now. You know what I mean? I lived it. I've been there. I want to know, are their fears similar to what my fears were when I was there? I want to know, are their concerns similar to what some of my concerns were when I was there, when I sat in the cell for the time that I did. So, and knowing that I'm here to serve them, to try to make sure that they're treated with humanity, and I'm here for them. So do I think I get kicked back for them? I think I would say no. I think my communication with them would be good.
Thank you.
So, Ms. Ellis, you speak on the mental health, mental hygiene, many people inside and out. Our community comes home in one of two ways, a body bag or in pieces, right? We talk about mental hygiene. So I hear you talk on the federal level and state. We all know the money is not the same. Federal funding is not the same versus state funding. And unfortunately, with this office, I think we talk about those who are inside, right? But you manage the halfway house programs, and that's still under DOC care, which technically should also be under this office, inclusive of even probation to some extent. Because if we really look at it, like the services and the needs of this community don't stop once they walk out those gates. They continue as long as you're under DOC, whether it's parole, pardons, probation, whatever, that's all in the same family. How would you address that? given the fact that that's a very gray area with this office. You know, it's been in the past not great. It has not been covered. So I'm wondering how would you address that if you would, you know, if you were to step into this role?
So I think that, and I wrote something down in my notes regarding that when it came to the aspect of the mental health. You know, I think with DOC, I think when someone comes into their facility and they do the assessments on them, right? They do the risk assessments, they do the ACEs assessments, they do the scores assessments. I think when they look at that and the continued treatment, not having access to the continued treatment, I think that's where the problem lies, right? I think DOC, they see that someone has mental health problems. I think the medication is given, and then I think that's it. A year later, they go to evaluate them again. So I think that when it comes to all the assessments, I think they should just look in more either monthly, quarterly, or what have you. So when they come out, right, how I address that with me, with the continued care, I do another scores assessment, right? And I see what is that they need, and I recommend and I do the referral service to what they need. So as the unbuns person, I think how I will adjust it with DOC is making sure that the assessments that they're doing, where they're constantly getting a continued care. So once they're released, that care can continue. It can follow them whatever halfway house they're going to. If they're going home on probation or parole, their officers know, like, they need to keep up on their mental health based on the assessments that we had that were conducted.
So I'm going to follow up with this because, you know, we talk about, you know, you specifically have experience with women, and I know you said you run a federal with men, right? So we know that even within the communities, there are these specific vulnerable subpopulations within our vulnerable population. You know, that includes women, that includes our juvenile lifers and juveniles who are still in the system. I'm hoping that is a part of your plan a goal to prioritize our vulnerable subpopulations within that population?
Of course.
Okay.
Of course it is.
And if so, how?
Well, when it comes to women, I think, you know what I mean, because I live there, right? And I see sometimes women are left out. We're left out of the equation when it comes to of what we may need or what trauma we've been through, what occurred while we were incarcerated, right? So I think sometimes that's overlooked. I think there's more services for men than it is women. So I think I would prioritize that making sure that women, you know what I mean, we are prioritizing what we went through and how we can overcome that. So yeah, I think that's.
Hello, Ms. Ellis. How are you?
How
Thank
are
you
you?
for
Good.
good. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
I think my question would be, like, a lot of times when we talk about you would be working with the governor's office, right? You would be working with the governor, working with and for the governor's office. How do you see yourself, how do you see yourself starting off your making that relationship work? How do you see yourself engaging with the governor's office? What are your thoughts? Because that sometimes you're going to have to, I'm sorry, I'm just going to add a
No.
little bit more, is like sometimes, you know, the stuff that's going on in the system, you got to report to the governor, but also that's your boss.
Okay.
So how do you feel like that relationship? Well, I'll let you answer. What do you think about that? How do you see yourself approaching that?
Well, I definitely would. Within my first 90 days, I think, you know, on top of the listening tours, I mean, I do want to connect with the governor's office. Like, I want to introduce myself to them. I want to see what his expectations are of me in the office. And working with him, if I have to report things to him that is sensitive, I think I would do it in the manner that this is the office. I mean, he's the governor. He has to support what it is that we're doing. I think he's been definitely supportive of it thus far, right? So, I mean, I just will have to bring it to him with sensitivity and, just hoping that he understands that what the needs are and what's going on inside the correctional facilities and that it's going to take his help to get what we need to get done.
Right. I just think about like I don't want to monopolize the meeting. I was just thinking about when people are doing tours and they're like the brothers are finding mice in their cell and stuff like that. It could be anything from large scale items to just as simple as, unfit living conditions. And at some point, if it's going to be your job, because they're going to come to you and they're going to say, it could be, I'm not getting my meds, or there's rats in our cell, or there's this going on. And so that's like an issue that how do you plan on deciding which issue is like that you need to address like right now? Which is how would you figure out which is the issue that you address right now? Like we need to get this done
Right.
now, or
Right.
this could be a month or two.
Well, I think with my plans would be, I would want to create a triage system, right? I think I would want to look at some of the cases that are coming in and assess them as they're coming in and put them on like on a triage system, maybe like on a scale of like a 1 to 10, what needs to be addressed right now? Not that we're putting it to the side, not that we're leaving it there. We just kind of do what's more important right now, what's more severe to address right then and there. So, with the staff and staff members that hoping the office can get, I think, we want to do a triage system. And I want to have a game plan in order of what needs to be done with that issue before I even speak to the governor about it. I want to have something I could take to him and before I even, bring it to him.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'd like to piggyback a little bit off that. We talked about the conflicting from those who are inside, but, we also talked about the governor's office. But, how, when we have these competing, issues of community stakeholders, right? We have community advocates, we have impacted family members on the outside who are calling and are saying my situation is predominant. What is your game plan in order to prioritize obviously needs that, obviously read the paper, look at the news,
Mhm.
you see these cases that are very highlighted.
Mhm.
So what is your game plan in order to be able to address the competing needs as well as the people who want your ear?
I mean, again, I just think that, like I said, I would want to create a triage system. I mean, I think that's just going to be the best thing. We can't address everything coming in at one time. I mean, not that everything's not important. All cases coming in are important, right? But I think we need to see which ones are more severe than others. And a lot of things, I'm sure, that is going to be coming into the office won't be for the office, right? So a lot of things can be handled on the DOC level. The office probably won't need to be handle it. But things that the office should handle and just stay in office, I definitely will want to put it on a scale and, just look at the whole strategic and analysis about it and put it on a scale and address it that way.
I think as you know, there's a sort of statutorily enumerated list of responsibilities called Ombud Services for this position. I wonder if you've given any thought to which of those you feel like you're most prepared for and which of them you feel like you would maybe need to delegate or you might be less prepared for. And if you can touch in response to that on your plan or vision for hiring staff for this office, including an associate ombuds, and what sorts of backgrounds you'll be looking for to fill out that staff.
I have my notes on that too. So my plan, first and foremost, with the staffing, I definitely will want an assistant. I think an assistant will be much needed for me. I will want someone who is much like me, have the passion for the population that we're serving, right? Who got some lived experience with it, but also some knowledge and a skill set to do the job. So I think my first priority would be hiring an assistant. I think the second one I will look into is someone with the data. Again, all the data, when I say, as I said to Marisol, all the cases coming in, triaging them. I would need someone to put this on a spreadsheet so we can keep track of the data and all the cases that came in. I think that answered you, right?
So you said something earlier when you talk about prioritizing cases, right? And
Mhm.
and I'm wondering your experience in telling a family member, right? When you say as you're doing triage, what would be your response to a family member that says to you, who calls and reaches out to your office? And when we talk about transparency and accountability, what would be your response to someone who says, well, my family is important to me?
I would ensure that family member that no one's unheard, right? It's not unseen and it's not unheard. We're just prioritizing cases based on the severity, not that their case is not important, right? I think I just would have to ensure them the best way I can, Mayor, so that we're not ignoring them. They're not unseen, they're not unheard. As cases coming in, we're just, looking at them case by case, and someone will get out to them shortly. I mean, they're just not going to be unseen and unheard. I would just reassure them of that.
Thank you.
Ms. Ellis? My name is Mr. Brown. I'm calling you because my son has asthma. He hasn't had his pump. He's in there having asthma attacks in his cell right now. What would you do? How would you address that? Like, because that would be you know what I mean? I'm just like kind of throwing you, and I don't mean to do it like that, but I do mean to do it like that because that's the reality of sometimes it might be something like that.
And
That's coming to like he's not getting his medication. Like everybody that does this work, all of us that do this work in this community, we receive those calls all the time. Even if we're not in them, but I'm not an ombudsman, but that's the kind of call you'll get. My son, I don't know who to talk to. I don't know where to go. So I'd like to hear about something like how would you address that? I'm Mr. Brown. My son is he doesn't have his asthma pump. Because that's not a triageable thing.
No, it's not. I mean, the first thing I would do is I would ask that family member, did he try reaching out to anybody in DOC at the facility? And if he tells me no, he tried to make phone calls, I would try to find out who did he speak with, right? Because we know anytime you call an institution, you're never getting right to the warden. You're never going to get right to the director at Health Services. You may not even get that person's counselor on the phone. So you may just talk to an officer who's in the control room, answering the phone calls, and are not putting the calls through the way they should go, or putting them through a machine, and the answer machine's coming on. So I think I would just try to find out and if did they call DSC and who did they speak to first, right? And if they did speak to somebody, what was said. I don't think I would jump in right deep in, you know what I mean? I wouldn't contact any wardens or anything like that to help that family member out, right? I think I probably will call and ask for maybe the counselor and ask the counselor what's going on. Did they speak to this family member, so on and so forth. I wouldn't jump right into, to the warden. I wouldn't try to use my power to do anything like that. You know what I mean? I would just follow the proper protocols before I kind of really think we should step in full force.
No, I was gonna say yeah, at first, because sometimes it is a phone call. It is about the phone call, but
Right.
Marisol, it is about right? Somebody having that phone call, somebody making that call for them, somebody making that call. Like
Right.
sometimes it's just as simple as somebody making that call for that individual. Go ahead.
So I think this is kind of what I think I was getting at earlier in terms of prioritizing when people say my family, he talked about asthma, he talked about different things.
Mhm.
We've all seen things play out in the media, but I think when you speak of a triage system, right? And I think this is where we talk about accountability, transparency, and ambiguity. Unfortunately, statutes is real easy for people to point out, this language. Sometimes lay people, doesn't really matter what your educational background, but especially when you're on the inside.
Mhm.
A process and procedures are done one way, right? However, DOC advanced directives are their directives. That's a system and a world that's years in the making with a lot of additions that are not very clear.
Mhm.
So I think what we're asking, and maybe, a goal maybe, is what does it look like for you in terms of the Ombudsman website that provides information that's clear and directional when we talk about things like this, because no one's really thinking clearly when they get a call from their family member or they get a call from the hospital. My dad is in ICU and here's the problem. You can't see him. There's policies and procedures for DOC that carries right over to the hospitals.
Mhm.
So I think everybody wants to have a clear answer of what what an idea that you would have in place or a policy of how would you handle that, in which direction?
Well, I think to say that, a website is definitely is needed, right? But I think one thing, and to kind of just think, when I worked in corrections, right? I think that every institution, once the ombudsman is in place, right? I think every institution should have a point person that the ombudsman can call when issues like that arise, right? So we're not all over the place talking to everybody at the facility. We're not handling with different people. I think that maybe talking to the warden in that institution and seeing, hey, maybe you can appoint a person that the ombudsman, when things like this arise, that they can communicate directly with that person. We can get the information, we can see what's going on. And yeah, and then we're not all over. We're not talking to Tom, Joan, Mary. We're not talking to everybody, and all the information is getting all over the place, and we're not figuring out what happened and what's going on. So I would think that a point person from each institution that can communicate directly with the ombudsperson prior to the ombudsperson having to go to the higher level.
Thank you so much for the answer so far. I think every candidate, I've probably asked one version of this question or another, but one of the challenges of the ombudsman's role is balancing the direct complaints versus the trends. And so to the hypothetical of someone experiencing asthma attacks without an asthma pump, there is an approach to addressing the direct need of why that person did not have their asthma pump. And then there's the larger investigation of, is there a trend in the Department of Corrections about people with asthma not actually getting the medical services that they need? And when you listed the potential hires, an assistant and a data person, it strikes me that you would not be capable of delving deep into investigations and trends to determine whether or not administrative regulations of the Department of Corrections are, causing poor service delivery or whatever it may be. And so just curious how you think about weighing the direct need complaint addressing and the trends and larger, deeper investigations to a system that may ultimately not be delivering a service of quality.
I think that's a good question. So I think when it comes to this, I will look at it as a short term and a long term, right? I will look at on the short term, what needs to be addressed right now on the short term level, right? And then I will look at the needs of things on a long term level to get a better perspective of things in the longer term. So I would just use them as a short term and a long term thing. So that's how I would look at it.
Any other questions from committee? I'm just reminded Dr. Howell is also on the Zoom, so please jump in if no pressure, but yeah.
Thanks, Tig. No, I'm good so far. I've been following along closely.
Okay, thank you. But just jump in because we're not looking closely at the Zoom screen. Ms. Ellis, if there's anything else that we didn't cover or any you'd like to say in closing, please go right ahead. But thank you so much for taking the time today and all the time you took with your application and meeting with us previously. We're grateful for your interest in the role.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
Okay, so yeah, if there's nothing, then we'll move on to Mr. Ward. And Ms. Ellis, you're welcome to stay if you like.
I know, say, you guys want me to stay? Oh.
We don't need you to, but you're no longer sequestered, so you're welcome to stay or.
All right.
Afternoon, Mr. Ward.
Good evening.
Thank you again for joining us. Thanks for your patience as we work through our other candidates. What we've been doing is inviting each finalist to make an opening statement, if you like. Tell us about yourself, your vision for the office, and then we'll take some time to ask questions. So go
Sure.
right ahead.
Thank you. Thank you to the Correction Advisory Committee for having me here tonight. I'm deeply honored to appear before you as a candidate for the position of Correction Ombudsman. This candidacy represents the culmination of my professional journey and my enduring commitment to justice, equity, and fairness within our legal and correctional systems. My career has been defined by a dedication to upholding the principles of justice in various capacities. As a practicing attorney, I managed the law practice focused on civil rights litigation and criminal defense, representing clients in state and federal courts. Through this work, I gained invaluable experience advocating for those who might otherwise lack a voice in the legal system. Notably, I've litigated complex medical cases involving the Connecticut Department of Correction, securing significant outcomes that have reinforced my belief in the importance of accountability and transparency within the correctional system. Beyond the courtroom, my work as senior legislative counsel for the Marijuana Policy Project demonstrated my ability to shape impactful policy. Collaborating with lawmakers and stakeholders, I contributed to the passage of Connecticut Public Act 21-1, a law that helped clear the criminal records of over 40,000 individuals convicted of nonviolent minor drug offenses in Connecticut. This experience reinforced the importance of thoughtful advocacy and the need to build consensus around meaningful reform. In addition, my roles within municipal and state government, including as Director of Intergovernmental Affairs for the City of Hartford and Legislative Liaison for the Connecticut Department of Public Health, have provided me with a comprehensive understanding of public administration. These roles have strengthened my ability to navigate complex systems, foster collaboration, and implement solutions that advance public trust. My commitment to this role is also deeply personal. Growing up with loved ones who served significant sentences within the Connecticut Department of Correction has given me an intimate understanding of the human side of our justice system. This experience motivates me to ensure that every individual within the correctional system is treated with dignity and fairness. The role of correctional ombudsman is one of profound responsibility to amplify the voices of those within the correctional system, investigate concerns, and recommend solutions that promote justice and rehabilitation. I am eager to bring my unique blend of legal experience, policy experience, and personal perspective to this vital work, and I am committed to serving as a fair, impartial, and effective advocate for incarcerated individuals and their families. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today, and I welcome any questions that the committee may have.
Thank you very much. So you're in a unique position of essentially being in this position in an interim capacity right now. So with that in mind, I'm wondering what has been most surprising to you in the months you've been in the role? What challenges have you encountered that you might not have expected? What challenges did you expect that haven't been as significant? And has anything about your priorities or your kind of expectations or vision for the office changed since you've actually been in it in an interim capacity?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I would say the biggest challenge is resources for the office. I'm a one-man shop, and the charge of the ombudsman is representing 10,000 individuals who are incarcerated, another additional 2,000 who are paroled in our communities across 12 facilities, in facilities as far north as Suffield and as far south as Bridgeport. And that's a weighty task for one person. In addition to, now that the legislative session started, have to opine on legislative proposals. The agency legislative proposals were recently released today, so I have to go through those. And then I have to manage the claims. The office, since I've been in the role since September, has received over 200, almost close to 250 individual claims at this point. And so it is a tremendous amount of work for one person to take on. And so the biggest challenge I would say right now is getting resources and staff for the office to be able to handle all those responsibilities that are enumerated in the statute. I would say one area that has been a welcome surprise is the willingness of the Department of Correction to accept this position and collaborate with the Office of the Ombudsman. I can say that the Department of Correction, whatever I've asked for, whether it's been documentation or whether it's been access to facilities or access to individuals, has not put up any roadblocks and has been collaborative and welcome partners, provided me a wealth of information and data, and it is largely supporting the efforts of this office. And so that's been a welcome surprise.
Thank you. So at the moment, is it correct you're the only person in the office? There's
Yes.
no staff yet. So what thought have you given and to how you'll go about hiring, what the priorities are for building out the staff, recognizing, of course, the budgetary constraints that you or anyone in this office would face, but just, knowing your own capabilities and competencies, what do you think the priority is for filling out the office?
Sure. So the budget request that I've made to the governor is an office staff of between 8 and 10 individuals. And I'll go into depth a little bit about how those roles are going to be broken up. The correctional system in Connecticut is actually broken up into 2 district areas, District 1 and District 2. They're divided almost in half, 6 prisons and 6 prisons. I would largely structure the Office of the Ombudsman in a very similar way, in that you'd have 2 districts. Each district would have an associate ombudsman, an investigator, an office admin, and a staff attorney. The goal would be for those 4 staff or 8 staff for each district to be in each facility at least twice a month. Additionally, I've been in communication with the Department of Correction in terms of navigating how individuals who are incarcerated will be able to reach out to the Office of the Ombudsman. They have assured me that in each phone in any correctional facility, they can set up a secured line where folks can contact the Office of the Ombudsman directly and be able to file or lodge complaints and claims. That's in addition to the folks from the office being in each facility at least twice a month, and then also a drop box for complaints that's only accessed by folks from the Office of the Ombudsman as well. And so to your question on how the office is set up, it's almost 4 staff members to start for each district. I think that would give the office at least a base level to be able to see how that goes and then reassess in 2 years in the next fiscal cycle.
Hi, Mr. Ward.
Hi.
My question to you is this: you mentioned 250 complaints.
Yeah.
What has been done for those individuals that have complained, and what do you see is the system you're using or method you're using in order to respond to people that complain?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So I am tracking all those complaints on an Excel spreadsheet. So it's a very tongue-in-cheek way to try to categorize and prioritize 250 complaints. What I've requested also in my budget is a tracking system, very similar to what the claims commissioner here in the state of Connecticut has. It's like a task management or a file management, case management software that the state of Connecticut already uses to be able to track claims of folks that come in, be able to send them automated responses, and also be able to time or track response times. And so that's in part of my budget request. It's a software request in my budget. In terms of how I'm handling it currently, I've prioritized medical complaints. So folks who are having immediate or urgent medical issues, whether it be access to prescriptions, outside consultations for particular medical treatments. Those are the complaints that I've prioritized. And then security and safety concerns, folks who have allegations of issues with other incarcerated individuals, issues with other staff, prioritizing that they either are being transferred to facilities where they don't have those kind of issues, or being put on some type of protective status, protective custody, segregation status, where some of those safety and security threats are eliminated. And so I prioritize those complaints. Now, there are still a number of complaints, and I've received a number of complaints related to inmate assaults or involving staff. And I haven't been able to investigate those fully just because I don't have the resources. You know, in my prior career as an attorney, to do an investigation takes a significant amount of time. You have to meet with staff, you have to meet with the person making the complaint, you have to review videotape, then you have to produce your findings, wait for DOC to respond back to you. So I haven't had the ability to look into assaults as much as I wanted to, but I've tried to prioritize the emergent medical claims that I've received and also the safety and security claims that I've received.
Thank you. I have a follow-up question. Sorry, I haven't said anything, so. My follow-up question is, have you been able to identify patterns that are more systemic issues versus individual, like isolated incidents?
Yeah, absolutely. So even through the Excel spreadsheet, you can start to see some trends in terms of which facilities are having kind of longstanding problems. For instance, there's a particular facility that I'm receiving a high number of complaints that folks are being taken off their psychotropic meds. And so, I've had a conversation with the commissioner about, and the health service team about that particular situation. So you can start to see some trends emerge from the things that I've seen, but also, I've toured 8 facilities. And since I've been here in September, or since I arrived in September, which means I've walked the housing units and living conditions of, I would say, roughly 7,000 inmates, 7,000 incarcerated folks in the state. And so through that experience, I've been able to identify and talk to folks and identify some concerns. I think, medical is a top concern, the medical system in terms of the medical grievance process and the delivery of care. There are significant staffing shortages in the medical staff. For instance, Osborne Correctional has not had an optometrist in 2 years. There are facilities that have a part-time dentist. Bridgeport is one of them, has a dentist that comes in, maybe once a week or twice a week. That's a facility that holds like 600 individuals. So there are huge gaps in terms of staffing shortages for medical care. Mental health care is obviously a top priority. The number one thing I hear from incarcerated folks is programming, particularly in the county jails, your Corrigan, New Haven, and Hartford. Lack of programming for folks who are not incarcerated. Lack of law library, particularly in the unsentenced facilities. York Correctional, our only women's prison, does not have a law library, which I think is a huge legal issue, right? Red flag legal issue that the only women's prison doesn't have a law library and the men do. I think the other big issues that have been identified are the grievance process, the disciplinary process in terms of tickets. And DOC is a broken process in that, when a disciplinary ticket is filed, high 90% of those disciplinary tickets, they're substantiated and they go in favor of the officer. And oftentimes, someone who appeals or objects to the ticket suffers a worse punishment than if they just plead guilty and accept the punishment. And so it's a pretty broken process in that regard. I think the grievance process in terms of they have 2 grievance processes, one for custody grievances and one for medical grievances. I think both processes need to be revamped. A situation I encountered at a facility is, an individual is having problems with his tooth. He wrote and identified 3 different providers in the grievance, and the grievance was denied because he mentioned 3 different providers. And then they said you had to write a separate grievance for each provider. And, I helped troubleshoot it because I said, look, if we were in the legal world, right, and you got into a car accident, you were hit by 2 different people, you wouldn't have to file 2 different complaints. You could identify 2 different people in the same complaint. And I think the process should work very similar to that. And so the grievance process, I think, could be revamped. And the other last thing I'll mention is the security risk group classification. So it's a SRG classification. It's how the prison identifies folks who may be gang affiliated. And what I've found is the folks who are designated as SRG or gang affiliated through either a communication that's sent to them, a communication they send out, letters, or things they may say, or even tattoos or anything they may have, things that identify them as possibly gang affiliated, puts them in this group. And once you're in this group, you essentially, lose significant rights that are afforded to you as a incarcerated person. You're restricted in terms of the number of phone calls you can have. You can't have any contact visits. You're not really allowed to access programming in any meaningful way. And so I really think that classification system really needs to be revisited and reworked. And so those are some of the trends, just to identify a few that I've noticed in my short 3 months in the role. And these are all issues, if the Department of Corrections is listening, I've raised these issues with leadership with DOC directly, and they know these are issues that I'm going to be looking at moving forward.
Thank you.
Good evening, Attorney Ward. Thank you so much for the walkthrough of the trends. And correct me if I'm wrong, what I'm reading as an orientation towards like trends as like key things to address, whether it's through DOC or outside of DOC through statutory changes or whatever it may be. It seems like the power of the office really rests in its budget and the personnel that can conduct the activities. One, have you thought about a plan B if you are not to receive the kind of requested ask from the governor's office, at least in the initial governor's budget, and potential related budget advocacy? And also just curious on your thought of DOC being $500 million agency budget, is there any merit to a fixed percentage of the ombudsman's office of the full DOC budget as a way to, like, if the DOC budget is growing, the ombuds office should be growing as well, so that a larger DOC system is also tied to a larger oversight system as well?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. That's an idea I'm interested in pursuing. One of the statutory changes I'm also interested in pursuing is making the Office of the Ombudsman not subject to OPM's budget considerations. The State Elections Enforcement Commission has that authority already, and that their budget is not subject to budget negotiations. They propose a budget, and the legislature essentially provides them with the resources that they think are reasonable. I think the Ombudsman's office should have similar authority. And so, I'm interested in pursuing, I think, a number of legislative avenues to try to create a situation where the Office of the Ombudsman is not coming to the legislature each year, hat in hand, asking for resources to match, a huge agency. So if the stars don't align and I'm not able to access the budget that I presented, we'll have to try to make do with what I have and kind of continue to operate in the way I have, and really splitting my time between being in facilities and manning the office and responding to complaints. So I will say if there's not a budget put behind this office, whoever the ombudsman person is insignificant. And so there's not any individual that can do this job. And so, I think it's not it would be impossible to move forward if this office does not receive a budget.
So in sticking in line with the budget, and how are your attorney work?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Good.
Man, I have so many questions. But I think the first one I'll start with is, what does the numbers look like? What is the number? Could you tell us like a ballpark of the eight staff you're talking about? What is that in addition to your $400,000 that they say you have?
So it's a little bit shy of 2 million. It's like 1.8.
Okay.
Somewhere around there.
And then my other question would be, have you thought of other avenues for revenue streams? Or is there a reason that prevents you from seeking like BJA funding, grant funding, other avenues like government, like there are grants out there? Are there any reasons that would prevent you from going for those?
No, there's no limitations except for time.
Okay.
And that, I've been hyper focused on trying to meet with my constituency and trying to address their concerns. So I haven't had the opportunity yet to look at outside funding sources, but I'm absolutely welcome and open to them.
Okay. And then the last question, I think maybe, I like to set you up like the last question, but it might not be. I might have another one. You talked about the clearing of records or being a part of the clearing records, right? Have you followed up, or have you do you know if that system is even working? Because a lot of people that I know, myself included, I haven't checked, records aren't clear, right? Their records aren't clear, even though it was said that it was supposed to be. And then do you see that as a role for the ombudsman to be following up in that space as well? I know you're already stretched thin, but I'm just thinking like, because, you know, I really think about the reentry population, people that are coming back to our communities that need things.
Sure.
And a clear record, if there's a system that's in place, who, like, other than it being the onus of the individual, do you see it that, you know, especially if you have that, some of that knowledge about that, is that
Yeah.
something that
So
you,
I look at the Ombuds as also being a resource center. So, you know, one thing I'd love to be able to put on the website is some resources. So some information on the Board of Pardons and Paroles who have jurisdiction over clearing criminal convictions. But to your question about, you know, related to cannabis convictions and folks, so there's almost it's a hybrid process. So depending on when you received your cannabis conviction, it may have been automatically expunged. I think those essentially the change is in Connecticut, we essentially declassified all drug possession charges and kind of lumped them together. So essentially drug possession was a misdemeanor. When that happened, it changed the statutory change. And so when they expunged the records that date, some were able to be expunged automatically. Others you have to petition the court for, and they're not automatic. So when I talked about those 40,000 records that were expunged as part of the cannabis bill, those were automatic expungements. So those were all, if I'm, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think those were cannabis convictions after 2011, 2011 or 2015 is when we changed the state statute to make drug possession of any drug a misdemeanor. And so if your cannabis conviction occurred prior to then, you have to petition the court to have it erased for erasure. So to your point, there may be a number of individuals who have cannabis convictions that are eligible, but it's not an automatic erasure or expungement. And so they can certainly petition the court. It is a bit of a process because you have to, you should try to obtain the police report from where you received your conviction.
right?
And then you have to petition the court from where you were convicted of, file the motion for erasure or petition for erasure. And then the court usually grants it. They'll give you a piece of paper saying that the charge has been erased. I've done that as a private attorney, so I'm familiar with the process. But for some folks, it may have not been automatic. But the folks that I was referencing in my testimony were the folks who it was automatic. So it's 40,000 folks.
Appreciate it. And the 250 complaints that you got do you have a system? Do they know that? Maybe you didn't get to them yet or got to their complaint, but do they know that your office has received? Is there a system that you have to just let me know that you got my complaint?
No, and I feel that's unfortunate, and that folks don't know. So the receiving of resources for this office has been a tremendous challenge, and that you know I wasn't really informed on even how to get postage to be able to send correspondence to folks who are incarcerated. And so I have it. So that's where the tracking system that I discussed is really important because it'll really allow our office admin to be able to input the individual's information and a form letter to be kicked out immediately to say, we've received it. Please give us 30 days to respond. And so unfortunately, to answer your question, no, there are a number of individuals who have reached out to my office, who have sent letters, and I've lodged their communication, but I have not had an opportunity to respond back to even tell them that I've received it.
Okay. Thank you.
Good.
Hi, Mr. Ward. The question I have is sort of how do you see us as a resource to you, given the kind of other resource limitations you're facing? Do you see us as kind of helping review individual cases, looking, just chatting more about systemic issues, or what do you think this relationship will look like if we finally get beyond the ombuds selection process?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. The Connecticut Ombuds exist in a network of ombuds throughout the country. Connecticut's not the first state to do this. And so, as part of the thing, that I did when I first came in, thanks to Governor Lamont, is he introduced me to my counterpart in New Jersey. And they've extended an opportunity for me to go down there and check out their operations and see how they're doing things. But there are ombuds, there's at least, I want to say 24 throughout the country. And so I think, something that an exercise that would be helpful for the public and also for the committee is to invite some of those individuals to discuss how their operations go. So Connecticut can get a sense of how they've built their offices, how they've structured their offices, what are the trends and how they've addressed them. So you all can have a better sense on how this kind of runs and be able to provide better oversight for me in this role or whoever's in this role. I also think, all of you are all appointed by some type of legislative or executive branch authority. I think, being advocates and talking to those folks and telling them about the resource challenges of the office would be really helpful. But I also think through the process of inviting other ombuds and hearing about their operations too, we can help inform the public on what are some of the issues that the Office of the Ombuds is equipped to handle and what are some things that they are not. And so I think that's also been a tremendous challenge, is that there is a tremendous amount of miseducation about the role of the office. There are some folks who think that the Office of the Ombuds has some authority over the Department of Correction, that the Ombuds can mandate the Department of Correction to do certain things, and that is not the case according to the statute. So I think to answer your question, the committee could be helpful in kind of identifying some best practices and what some other states are doing, helping identify what are some issues that are ripe for the Office of the Ombuds to address, and what are some issues that are maybe beyond the purview, and then also advocating for more resources with your appointing authorities.
So I'd like to round out this last question, if anybody doesn't mind. I'm very much, as someone who's been inside, right? Nothing used to irritate me more than getting that response back from DOC, no, or you didn't follow chain of command, right? So we know that the administrative directives are shrouded in mystery, chaos, confusion, right? So I'm hoping, what is your plan for demystifying the administrative directives that are maybe in a fact sheet for not only those who are inside, but also, you spoke of it just now, in terms of clarifying what the office can do, cannot do, especially with other states, using as an example, like, what is your plan, or what have you already instituted? Because I think we had spoken about this once before, in terms of, in layman's terms, how to accomplish certain things, in which, what is the method and chain of command, that, if you will, of the process inside before it gets to you, and then what happens once it does get to you.
Yeah, so I think the Ombuds office has an obligation to teach folks who are incarcerated how to advocate for themselves within the structures that DOC has set up. And so part of that is educating folks on the grievance process, right? And I would love to have capacity in my office to be able to host town halls and instruct people on how do you file an administrative grievance? What happens with your administrative grievance? At what point should you contact the Ombuds office? Those are things I'd like to do town halls on, but I'd also like to put information on tablets, kind of PDFs, with some visuals on maybe a flow chart on kind of how it works, so folks can really be able to be in a position to advocate for themselves and use kind of the structures that are already in place within the DOC framework to try to bring about change. Now, if those avenues aren't successful and they don't work, I do want to create also kind of some PDFs that, these are the types of situations or types of things that the Office of the Ombuds handles. These are some things where you may have to seek private counsel or either file a lawsuit pro se, and even breaking that up in terms of what are claims that are ripe for state court, what are claims that are ripe for federal court, and even how do you go about that process, right? I think those are things that I'd be very excited about educating the incarcerated population on how to advocate for themselves. How does the claim commissions process work? That was the thing I encountered as a private attorney, and even I've encountered in this role is, there's a ton of folks that have ripe claims. I had a bottom bunk pass and I didn't get it, and I fell off a top bunk. Or, I injured myself while working in a shop printing license plates. How do I go about getting redress for my injuries? And I think the Ombuds has a role in teaching folks how to advocate for themselves. And so, the use of in-person education, town halls, and then the use of the tablets, I think could be a tremendous tool.
So you just mentioned, wanting to educate population on, the types of complaints that are maybe best handled through grievance process, through the ombuds, through private litigation. And it occurred to me, litigating, bringing lawsuits against the Department of Corrections is among the ombud services that falls under this office. Have you given any, I'm not suggesting, like, have you given thought to bringing a lawsuit, but have you given thought to that sort of power and when or if it might be appropriate? I do think the statute says as a last resort.
Sure.
Has anything in your time thus far as interim kind of made you evaluate when and if that might be appropriate, and what the sort of risks could be in terms of your continuing relationship with DOC, who has, as you said, have been quite cooperative thus far?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. So it's an issue, something I've put a good amount of time on and thinking about, and I've talked to the governor's general counsel about. So yes, I am a lawyer, but I do not have any authority to bring any lawsuits on behalf of the state of Connecticut or any state agencies. That power rests with the Attorney General's office. It just so happens that the Attorney General's office is also the attorney in the law firm for the Department of Correction. And so it would appear to me that the way that the statute is written in terms of giving the ombuds the authority to bring suit, from a practical standpoint, would be a challenge, in that you would have essentially the same law firm representing two litigants. The other situation, the other problem as the statute is written is the forum. You can only sue the state of Connecticut in state court with their permission. So that would mean that the forum you're litigating in would have to be federal court. And so it would be a challenge from a practical standpoint for the ombuds to bring litigation on behalf of a group or an individual who's incarcerated, just because they'd have to obviously talk to the Attorney General, who also represents the Department of Correction. What I think could be a solution, at least one solution, is that the ombuds is charged with investigating complaints. I think that if the ombuds office investigates a complaint and it is substantiated that either DOC policy has been violated or state or federal law has been violated, I think that the ombuds office in that investigation should allow someone to proceed directly to court. And that person, right now, the process is, even if the ombuds does an investigation, finds out that DOC policy hasn't been followed, state law has been broken, constitutional laws may have been violated, that person has to still go to the Claims Commission and still get permission to proceed in state court. I think that person, if the ombuds has done an investigation, that person should be allowed to proceed directly to court. And so that's something that I've had a conversation with the Claims Commission about. They receive about 300 claims a year, they've told me, and about more than half of those are from folks who are incarcerated. And so being able to have the ombuds office be almost a fact finder, if you will, on those complaints, figure out whether they have merit, and then allow folks to proceed directly to court under a negligence standard, a state law standard, I think would actually elicit the state bar, the private bar, and that folks in the private bar would be interested in litigating on behalf of these folks. In my experience as a civil rights attorney, having litigated against the Department of Correction, one of the huge hurdles is if you had a case that was meritorious, you would still have to wait potentially 3, 4, 5 years to get permission from the Claims Commissioner to just get your day in court, or you could proceed in federal court. But sometimes when you're proceeding in federal court, you're litigating under a heightened standard. You're either deliberate indifference, which is a violation of the 8th or 14th Amendment. And so I think if the ombuds was able to kind of be a fact finder and then allow folks to proceed to court who had meritorious claims under a state law standard, I think my friends in the private bar would be more than happy to take up cases of folks who are incarcerated.
So just kind of segueing from that somewhat, I can say from our experience going through this process last year that the prospect of litigation or of increased litigation, I think is something that doesn't excite the Department of Corrections
No.
or the governor's office. But I wonder, not and it's entirely appropriate, notwithstanding that, but I wonder if there is an opportunity for this role to be used in a way that it could potentially decrease litigation. I mean, I was a law clerk in federal court, and it was probably 30% of the docket in the District of Connecticut was prisoner cases, mostly pro se. And I think there is a certain feeling maybe in the Attorney General's office that not all of these claims belonged in federal court. But I think my impression of that was always that probably wasn't this person's first choice. It was kind of the venue where they thought they might be heard, and that there was not enough of that within the department. I mean, that's maybe a little editorializing, but kind of, do you see things that way at all? Do you think there's an opportunity here to sort of provide an outlet for conflict resolution, for folks who feel aggrieved to feel that they are heard, and conceivably, could there be some savings from that? You know,
Absolutely.
That,
Absolutely. Absolutely. To answer your question, absolutely. In the scenario I just presented about the individual with the dental problem, that individual is somebody who is serving a lengthy sentence and has no problem with litigating and waiting his time to get his day in court. But if we can get to the heart of the issue, which is, let's get this gentleman, connected with his dentist, and he can get, on the schedule for some dental treatment, we can eliminate litigation. So I absolutely think there's a role for the Ombudsman's office to play in reducing the amount of litigation, to serving as a bridge to facilitate conversations between DOC officials and folks who are incarcerated. And I do view litigation as a last resort. I don't take it lightly. Having engaged in litigation, it is war. I do not take it lightly, and would really try to use the office to try to mediate those concerns and try to stem the tide of litigation, as it were.
So, Attorney Ward, actually, this question actually now stems from what my co-chair actually just brought, and actually it brings to mind of a client that you had and you represented, who is still in DOC custody, but obviously this is with that young woman who gave birth. My concern, I think, or wondering where your stance is in protecting of those who are inside, because I think too many people are afraid of litigating or bringing that, people will wait till either they're at the end of sentence or will not even litigate at all because of the fear of retaliation in terms of while they're still inside, but also the financial cost of incarceration for all the turmoil and anguish and, all the physical, mental, and emotional issues that they deal with, to then have the Department of Corrections come and take a portion for cost of incarceration, wondering where your protection would be as ombudsman for something like that for people who are going through this process.
Yeah, so one of the things I take very seriously is the confidentiality of the Ombudsman's office, that folks who file claims with my office, that they are those claims are confidential unless the individual gives the Ombudsman's office permission to release their names to DOC officials. I think the question you raise in terms of retaliation is a really tough question, because I know it happens, even with folks who contact my office. I have tried to take the position in trying to, route out individuals who are intimidating folks who are incarcerated. I can say in the short time I've been in the role that I've personally intervened or personally contacted a warden and the security director and the district administrator regarding individuals who multiple incarcerated folks told me were intimidating and harassing folks. And so The retaliation issue is a really tough one to try to get around because you're not there 24/7, right? And as much as folks from the office may be in a facility, you know, at the end of the night, or the end of the day, you can't be there 24/7. So it is a issue. It is an issue I'm deeply concerned with. You know, I do think there need to be stronger protections and stronger penalties for folks who retaliate, you know, and that's something I think is a more systemic issue, you know, related to the bargaining agreement. You know, I ran into an example. I'll give you an example. I ran into a instance in my short time in this role where multiple incarcerated folks told me that a particular CO was using racial slurs throughout the facility. So I walked different housing units and I walked different housing units in a particular facility, and multiple incarcerated people, unbeknownst to what the other said, told me this CO uses racial slurs. So, and when I raised the concern with DOC officials, you know, they took it seriously. They said they were going to investigate it. But they also, you know, made me aware of the reality that once they complete their investigation and they substantiate it, if they substantiate it, it's up to labor to figure out what the punishment is. And that, you know, these officials who are, or officers who are employed, they're unionized and they have certain union rights and their discipline's controlled by their bargaining agreements. And so I say that all to say that the issue of retaliation it's a systemic issue. It's something that I think the penalties need to be enumerated stronger in the bargaining agreements. And, you know, that's something I think the ombuds could raise to the governor while he's negotiating these bargaining contracts. But it's a problem. And it's a problem that I'm still trying to wrap my head around in terms of how to protect the incarcerated population when they are making claims, because I do know the retaliation does happen.
Attorney Ward, I'm so glad you brought up the collective bargaining agreement for corrections officers. One of the, I'm aware of an effort to, you know, transform DOC's culture by sending folks abroad, having folks see how other prison systems across the world work, particularly those that are a bit more progressive. And there's been this kind of push for folks on criminal legal reform advocacy to be supportive of culture change within DOC, on the idea that you got to shift the culture from inside to actually get meaningful reform that has depth to it.
Yeah.
And as you also are alluding to and know, right, like part of the challenge is that collective bargaining agreements for both corrections officers, cops as well, right, like are tools to prevent accountability.
Correct.
And so there's this push to have advocates come to the table on culture change at DOC, but I don't see the same pushes for advocates to also provide input on collective bargaining agreements and how they effectively shield methods of accountability. And your office has a significant role in that you are obviously and you have the role of ensuring the proper care of incarcerated people, those folks on parole. And the governor's office is negotiating collective bargaining agreements.
Right.
And just curious, not to put you on the spot, but as you think about that role and your ability to provide counsel on how those collective bargaining agreements could be structured better for both corrections officers and for incarcerated people, because those agreements would ultimately improve conditions.
Yeah, I view this role as, you know, folks ask me, and even when I'm walking around facilities, they ask me, you know, what do you do? I am the chief advocate for 10,000 to 12,000 folks who don't have a voice, who are incarcerated here in the state of Connecticut. And as part of that role as the chief advocate, you know, I'm opining on everything from collective bargaining to reentry to conditions of confinement to sentencing. You know, I think all those issues. And so, you know, just to answer your question, it's an area that I'm interested in engaging in some advocacy and in some information and fact finding in terms of, you know, what's the state of what we have right now and where are opportunities for improvement. But, you know, it's an issue I think that's right for some discovery.
Attorney Ward, you answered my question one prong, not the second. And I think it speaks more in terms of the economic recoupment of people who have had to go through circumstances while they were incarcerated and still are in terms of settlements, because we know that the Department of Correction does take a percentage of cost of incarceration for settlement. And my concern is, I know there was legislation passed several years ago that I may be correct or incorrect, is I think the ACLU or someone may have stood behind it in terms of reducing the amount that they're able to recoup. And I'm wondering how your office would handle that when we're looking at those type of matters.
Yeah, so my position, as a litigator, my position in this role is that the state of Connecticut in a litigation situation should not be exercising their cost of incarceration lien when their care is subject to the litigation. And in my career as a litigator, I've worked with the Attorney General's office to waive those cost of incarceration liens with respect to the settlements that we were able to negotiate when the care or their conditions of confinement or custody was subject. We've gotten their cost of incarceration liens waived. And so, through this role, I'd continue in that advocacy, in whatever regard I could do. I will say too, that the Office of the Attorney General has reached out, and we are trying to figure out ways to work collaboratively in ways that the Office of the Ombudsman does have a role in mediating and opining on active litigation or things that may become potential litigation. And so we're still trying to navigate what that relationship would look like while respecting the litigation process. But that's a conversation that I did want to make the committee aware is ongoing.
Okay, well, thank you. I don't see any other questions up here. If there's anything you'd like to say to sum up, if you didn't get to say before, you're welcome to, but I just want to thank you for your interest in the position. Thank you for your service in the position thus far, and for your being here with us today.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to just move swiftly into public comment. We have a list of eight folks who have registered, and let me just confirm, what's the time for the you have 3 minutes. You do not have to use 3 minutes. That is the outer limit. But by all means, you've been very patient. So please, we'll start with Ivelisse Correa. Sorry, Ivelisse, I apologize. Sure. That you're Ivelisse? Okay, sure. Lillian Rivera is the next, although she is, I believe, remote. Not on there, okay. And Barbara Fair.
Hello. Hello. My name is Barbara Fair, Director at Stop Solitary CT. I have to say at this point, I'm getting more and more discouraged about how beneficial this role is going to be with all the mechanisms in place to keep real change from happening. It really saddens me because this was my dream, to get independent oversight, to do all of these great things. And then when I hear all the things that are in place to prevent it from happening, it's like, I hate to give up on the dream, but I don't want to continue being discouraged. And so at this point, I just hope we can get the best that we can get out of the position as is. And if I have to support, if you wanted to hear who I support, I would say I'd have to support Devon Ward, simply because I know him and did some work with him, and I don't know the other people. And to be honest, I wasn't that impressed with the people that you've put forth. So So I support Attorney Ward and pray we can do some of the many things that I thought we were going to be able to do with this position. And I think a lot of it's because what I've done all these years as a single person with just people, volunteers supporting me, and I see all the improvements that were being made, and I didn't have a big budget. I didn't have any budget, and to see what I've done, and then to see that we have a budget and so little can be done, it's like, I don't know. So I just hope that something can come out of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time. Okay, so we'll move on to Elaine Connor, who is remote, if she's there. No, okay. Cindy Pritzio.
My name is Cindy Prizzio. I represent a justice, or I am a member of a justice impacted family. And I'm also president and founder of One Standard of Justice. And I don't have my glasses today, so I'm gonna, I just wrote some points down. I've seen a lot since 2015. I've heard a lot. So I have personal experience visiting the prisons and having notes passed to me because of the fear of the people inside and the wrongdoings, the harm that was happening from corrections officers. So I'm angry because last night I was on the phone with another family of a 19-year-old who saw things he should have never seen. It was a 6-month sentence. He was out in 5 months. You know, I represent an oppressed group of people. The group is people who have been convicted of crimes of a sexual nature. And whether it be just ignorance or stupidity on a lot of people's part, including corrections, parole, probation. Sorry, God. I am tired of these people getting attacked, the name calling, the fear for their safety. Every time I hear that a person has died inside, I feel I have a 50% chance or higher that it's a person with a sexual crime. And so this 19-year-old was called a pedophile. I've heard of corrections officers, which is totally untrue if you knew the story. I've heard of corrections officers printing files and leaving it in visiting rooms so that other people who are incarcerated and different members could find out that the person that on file had been convicted of a crime of a sexual nature. Prisons are violent, and the people who have the most protection are the ones doing the most violence. So I too am really disheartened about what we're going to be able to accomplish. I was very happy to hear Devon say that he feels like he's the champion or the gladiator, the advocate for 10,000 people. Unfortunately, with parole and special parole, the number goes up. I'd like some clarification from this committee on what parole. I've talked to Devon about it. I feel there's not a clear definition of what the ombudsperson. I've always taken it. I've been the only one speaking about parole from day one. And maybe the prison
My
conditions,
apologies for interrupting, but your 3 minutes have expired.
may I go for another little? So, let me get my eyeglass out so I can see. So parole is I want to know, I want clarification.
Parole is certainly under the remit.
But I want clarification as what does that mean? And I think the ombudsperson we all need to know, what does that mean? I was happy also, I think Devon's starting to use person first language. I want to encourage him to do it all the time, and I will continue to work with him, as I'm sure Barbara will.
Thank you.
Um,
Ms. Puccio, you're of course welcome to come to our next meeting. We will put the parole question on the agenda for that to discuss. I do want to stick to the specific agenda here, which you know, the finalists for the position.
So may I just say one thing publicly? I had and there's a sort of, it's packed with a few messages. Maybe a day or two before Thanksgiving, a 61-year-old man was found guilty at a trial. He went to New Haven CI. Within 3 days, he was in the hospital with COVID. He had autoimmune disease. English is not a second language. He does not speak English. And upon his intake into New Haven, he only spoke to one person, the intake coordinator, who spoke Spanish. Spanish is not Swahili. We must make sure that our prisons are staffed with people who communicate with the language of the communities. That person could have died over health issues. And the last thing I'm going to say tied into it, I went to Senator Winfield. And as a result of Senator Winfield because it was over a holiday, he went to Commissioner Quiros and it was more or less taken care of. But I still had to get Devon involved. I don't see the ombudsperson being a 9-to-5 job. I don't. And I think that's also an issue that needs further discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Maya Neme on Zoom? No. Germano Kimbro. Is there anyone on the Zoom at all? Or okay. So the last in person would be DeAndre Brown. And then yes, yeah.
Asked for one other person who wasn't on the list, and we were waiting to hear theirs.
Sorry about. Yeah. Oh, well, she can speak. Yes, sure. Yeah. Right ahead, thanks.
How you doing? My name's DeAndre Grim D. Brown. Of Fallen Angels Music, an affiliate of BLM 860 and Stop Solitary. I'm here as an advocate for many things, but I'm very passionate about DOC and their failure to be transparent and take accountability for the tragedies that happens in their facilities. And I feel Devon Ward could make change for the better to a system that is twisted, corrupt, and as a whole unjust. I was incarcerated in Garner, CI, New Haven Correctional, Cybulski, Hartford Correctional, and Cheshire CI. In a total of over 4 years altogether. So I know what it's like to be in the prisons. And I've seen some inmates who are people left with nothing, no family, with malnutrition, hair shaven like it's a concentration camp. Because there's no one helping them. All the way to the inmates who are hurt and abused by COs that don't get penalized for it. And they know they get away with it, so they keep going. I was a victim of CO brutality. I was maced in the face while handcuffed with no fight in me, no resistance, even though they kept saying stop resisting. And none even after being wrongfully attacked. Jalen Jones was murdered almost the same way I was assaulted. Honestly, I feel like if I fought back, I probably would be in the same position or worse. I probably wouldn't be here right now if after I was maced, I fought back. Sorry.
No need to be sorry, brother. Take your time.
I feel like they do things to make it look like you're giving resistance. So they have an excuse to hurt you, which isn't right. and needs to be shown to the world so accountability is taken, justice is served, and officers being held to the same standard as all humans. I feel like the time is now for all people to be treated as humans, especially the ones incarcerated for nonviolent crimes, parole violations, to even people who are guilty before proven innocent, if possible, with how the law books are taken out of prisons and some inmates get public pretenders instead of public defenders. So I feel like Devon would help. And also, I feel like there's a lot of change that needs to be done and within the system and within those walls in general.
Thank you very much for sharing and for coming up here and your patience during the hearing. Appreciate it.
No
Ivelisse, would you? Okay.
Hello. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak today. My name is Ivelisse Correa with BLM 860. I'm Vice President. I come before this board the second time to testify for an ombudsman. After this commission heard from the incarcerated population and the community, you issued recommendations. Governor Lamont did not hear the people, and an entirely new process was put in place because the community spoke out and cried foul. I hope the expertise of this commission and the voice of the people will be heard by the leaders for the recommendations that leave this room. In case it happens a second time, I will provide a list of priorities that led me to my choice. This position needs funding. It's been stated several times by all applicants. New Jersey has a similar incarcerated population, and they have about 14 ombudsmen in that role. New Jersey has triple the population and only 3,000 more prisoners than Connecticut. We should be increasing their budget and making job postings immediately. So whoever you pick, please make sure to note that it is partially because of this work that it needs to be expanded. Next, the Falcon report was just released, and someone who wanted to give testimony today could not because they were in court representing someone who was raped by a correctional officer. We need someone who wants to deal with documented reports of abuse and documented violations of the PROTECT Act. It's been 2 years and the law is being applied inconsistently and rights are being infringed. I want someone who read the law and knows the power of the ombudsman and what needs to be expanded. Someone who also understands the chain of command and can deal with the immediate needs of the role. The day that the ombudsman office opened their doors in 2024, the interim ombudsman came in to his office to hundreds of complaints, not including the 200 that have been filed since September. No matter who we pick, we must give this person the position, or we must give the person in this position teeth for the office. I support Devon Ward in this role. I am underwhelmed by the other applicants. Some of their questions actually concern me, and I'm wondering what the vetting process was for today's hearing. Calling an incarcerated person's counselor during an asthma attack sure sounds like a CO letting someone die and, neglecting another inmate. Not being knowledgeable of the person currently in this position or not knowing the language in the law is concerning. I do think we need to provide more job security to someone if they push back or get someone upset. Devon sued DOC before, and I'm shocked he was selected, as his partner was passed over during the first round of applications. I've also had private conversations with legislators who have worked with Devon since taking this role and was recently asked to support some of those legislative priorities. I do hope he has the opportunity to push for those changes and advocate for people that are currently incarcerated. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing, coming up today. Is there anyone else left on the Zoom? Okay, so we'll close out the public hearing portion of our meeting. We're going to meet as a committee, I assume in another room, Kirsten. And we'll be in executive session. So I think I'm opening the meeting now, and then can we have a motion to go into executive session?
Second.
All in favor? All right, so we're gonna slip off. Folks are welcome to stay here. I don't think so. Yeah. So you're welcome to wait. when we come back, we'll simply be announcing the ranking that we've come up. Thank you.
After they give me approval, hey, can I have you vote? But I have to basically submit paperwork explaining the role, explaining why I need them in office to get it. Then DAS has to basically figure out how they're gonna post the job, the interviews. So by the time I now, I'm hoping maybe it could be early second quarter.
So can we get justice impacted people involved?
I would love that.
Okay, good.
But that's not the only criteria that I work with.
No, I agree.
Try to understand the first. Not mean you have.
Oh, but you have to look at
You're not gonna
each
eliminate that.
individual.
I would
Right.
say
Yeah,
just
it's not
that
gonna be
would
disqualified if
criteria.
you're just impacted or you have to be trying to be disqualified. But the other thing I want to be able to do, and I'm trying to work with the legal team.
Yes.
See, that's another thing that,
I like that.
that's another thing that frustrates me and has me disillusioned, is that getting anything from the governor who clearly does not care about incarceration. He has shown us that clearly. There's no mistake about it. So when I hear that you have to go to the governor for anything, I'm saying, what's the chances of it getting paid?
I don't think any executive.
Someone told me to not to go through DLC because I wanted independent. They said, well, go through the governor accountability. I didn't know what that department was. That's the only reason I agreed to. But if I hadn't known that we have to go into the governor, I was clearly so he could care less about the department.
So whatever I post or whatever in terms of you have to, I won't go there, but they have to have their, I want to be able to have volunteers help me in the office. New Jersey has volunteers to help them sort through the letters and things.
Yeah.
That. So I want to be able to have that.
It's on.
Oh, it's on YouTube.
Yes,
Okay.
I don't know if you're.
Yeah.
So we'll need a motion to adjourn our meeting.
Motion.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, so the meeting of the Correction Advisory Committee has adjourned, and we're just back to say what we did. Attorney Ward, you're going to have to go to work again tomorrow. Our ranking is number 1, Devon Ward, number 2, Keisha Ellis, and number 3, Dawn Poindexter. And we will convey that list to the governor. I want to just again thank both our 3 finalists and all the other applicants for this position, and all the other applicants who applied last year when we went through this. It's great to see an interest and the passion that a lot of folks have for this, notwithstanding the serious obstacles and constraints that we've discussed tonight. And in that light, I do want to echo something that Attorney Ward said, and I think a few others repeated, which is that it unfortunately does not matter who is in this role if the funding for the office is not increased. I think one of our speakers remarked about the governor not choosing our top finalists last year and what that might have suggested. I think the proof in the pudding is more in the willingness of both the governor and our legislators to step up and actually give this office the funding that it not just deserves, but absolutely needs. We don't need to go on at length, but as one of our speakers said, the budget for this office pales in comparison to the ombuds positions in other states. It pales in comparison to similar positions in this state. And I think that's the strongest indication of whether our elected officials actually have reform in mind, is whether they're willing to, in fact, fund this office so that it can do the things that it's meant to per the enabling statute. So that's all. We thank you all for being with us tonight, for your patience, for your comments. Congratulations, Mr. Ward. And again, thank you to our other candidates. I don't think we need any motion to end this, so we'll just bid you all good night. Thank you.